द एंगेजमेंट पार्टनर शैल बी सेटिस्फाइड, जो हमारा एंगेजमेंट पार्टनर है वो सेटिस्फाई होना चाहिए कि दैट अप्रोप्रिएट प्रोसीजर्स रिगार्डिंग द एक्सेप्टेंस एंड continuance of client relationship and audit engagement has been followed or not. तो उसके लिए what will happen, सी एक्सेप्टेंस एंड कंटिन्यूइंग द क्लाइंट रिलेशन, पहले तो एक्सेप्ट होगा, एक्सेप्ट करने के बाद कंटिन्यू होगा उन दोनों का रिलेशनशिप. तो एंगेजमेंट पार्टनर को, जो हमारा ऑडिटर है, वो उसको सेटिस्फाई होना है कि अप्रोप्रिएट प्रोसीजर्स जो है रिगार्डिंग द एक्सेप्टेंस एंड कंटिन्यूइंग द क्लाइंट रिलेशनशिप एंड ऑडिट एंगेजमेंट हैज़ बीन फॉलोड. हमारा जो SQC1 है, आज स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ क्वालिटी कंट्रोल 1 रिक्वायर करता है फर्म कि वो ऑब्टेन करे इंफॉर्मेशन बिफोर एक्सेप्टिंग एन एंगेजमेंट इंफॉर्मेशन सच एज द following assist the engagement partner in determining whether the decisions regarding acceptance and continuance of audit engagement are appropriate or not. तो engagement accept करने से पहले फर्म को obtain करना पड़ेगा information, और following जो हम चीज़ें डिस्कस करेंगे वो हेल्प करेगा ऑडिटर को कि डिटरमाइन करना वेदर ये एंगेजमेंट मेरे को एक्सेप्ट करना है कि नहीं. सो SQC1 रिक्वायर्स द फर्म टू ऑब्टेन इंफॉर्मेशन before accepting an engagement information such as following: assist the engagement partner in determining whether the decisions regarding the acceptance and continuance of audit engagement are appropriate. जैसे कि पहले इंटीग्रिटी ऑफ प्रिंसिपल ओनर्स की मैनेजमेंट TCWG ऑफ द एंटिटी. तो पहले इंटीग्रिटी है क्या, वेदर द एंगेजमेंट टीम कॉम्पिटेंट है क्या उनका ऑडिट परफॉर्म करने के लिए. सो वेदर द एंगेजमेंट टीम इज कॉम्पिटेंट टू परफॉर्म द ऑडिट एंगेजमेंट एंड हैज नेसेसरी कैपेबिलिटीज इंक्लूडिंग टाइम एंड रिसोर्सेज. whether the firm and engagement team can apply with relevant ethical requirements. Significant matters that have arisen during the current or previous audit engagement and their implications for continuing the relationships. तो significant matters क्या arise हुए और उनके implications क्या होंगे. If the engagement partner obtains information that would have caused the firm to decline the audit engagement and that had the information been available earlier, the engagement shall communicate that information promptly to the firm so that the firm and the engagement partner can take the necessary actions, right? So this is acceptance and continuance of client relationships. SQC1 के हिसाब से पहले integrity of principal owners, key management and TCWG, whether the engagement team is competent to perform the audit engagement and has necessary capabilities including time and resources, whether the firm and the engagement team can comply with relevant ethical requirements, and significant matters that have arisen during the current or previous audits engagement and their applications for continuing the relationship. अगर पहले पता होता तो वो जिसकी वजह से अगर वो डिक्लाइन कर पाते ऑडिट एंगेजमेंट, तो वो आप कम्युनिकेट करोगे इन्फॉर्मेशन प्रॉम्प्टली टू द फर्म, और ताकि लेटर फर्म एंड एंगेजमेंट पार्टनर कैन टेक नेसेसरी एक्शन. नेक्स्ट इज ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेज. फर्म को एस्टैब्लिश करने चाहिए पॉलिसीज एंड प्रोसीजर्स जिसको डिज़ाइन किया गया है टू प्रोवाइड विद reasonable assurance that it has sufficient personnel with the capabilities, competence, commitment to ethical principles necessary to perform its engagement and in accordance with the professional standards and regulatory and legal requirements, and to enable the firm or engagement partners to issue reports that are appropriate in the circumstances. तो ऐसे policies and procedures ऑडिटर के फर्म को एस्टैब्लिश करने चाहिए ताकि रीजनेबल अश्योरेंस मिले कि हमारे पास जो पर्सनल है ना वो सफिशिएंट है विद कैपेबिलिटी, कॉम्पिटेंस एंड कमिटमेंट टू एथिकल प्रिंसिपल्स to perform the engagement in accordance with the professional standard and regulatory and legal requirement. तो कुछ policies and procedures that address the personal issues are recruitment, performance evaluation, capabilities, competence, career development, promotion, compensation and estimation of personal needs, right? Recruitment, performance evaluation, capabilities, competence, career development, promotion, compensation and estimation of personal needs. Addressing these issues enable the firm to ascertain the number and characteristics of individuals required for the firm's engagement. The firm's recruitment process includes procedures that help the firm select individuals of integrity as well as the capacity to develop the capabilities and competence necessary to perform the work. Next is engagement performance. यहाँ पे again firm को establish करने चाहिए वो policies and procedures जिसको design किए जाएंगे to provide it with reasonable assurance that engagements are performed in accordance with the professional standards and regulatory and legal requirements, and that the firm or the engagement partner issues reports that are appropriate in the circumstances. Through its policies and procedures, the firm seek to establish consistency in the quality of engagement performance. This is often accomplished through written or electronic manuals, software tools, or other forms of standardization, documentation, and industry or subject matter specific guidance materials. Matters addressed include the following. तो engagement परफॉर्मेंस में कंसिस्टेंसी होनी चाहिए. कंसिस्टेंसी होगी तो क्वालिटी होगी ऑफ द एंगेजमेंट परफॉर्मेंस. तो उसके लिए ये कंसिस्टेंसी अकम्पलिश करने के लिए हम मैनुअल, डॉक्यूमेंटेशंस, गाइडेंस मटेरियल सब यूज़ कर सकते हैं. तो मैटर्स जो एड्रेस करते हैं ये सारी चीज़ें क्या इंक्लूड होनी चाहिए कि हाउ द एंगेजमेंट टीम्स आर ब्रीफ्ड ऑन द एंगेजमेंट टू ऑब्टेन एन अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ द ऑब्जेक्टिव्स ऑफ द वर्क प्रोसेस for complying the applicable engagement standards, processes for engagement supervision, staff training and coaching, methods for reviewing the work performed, the significant judgments made and the form of report being issued, and appropriate documentation of the work performed and of the timing and the extent of the review, processes to keep all policies and procedures current. ठीक है, तो ये सारे मैटर्स इंक्लूड होने चाहिए तो आपके इसमें कंसिस्टेंसी हो सकती है इन द क्वालिटी ऑफ एंगेजमेंट परफॉर्मेंस. व्हाट वुड दे बी? हाउ एंगेजमेंट टीम्स आर ब्रीफ्ड ऑन द एंगेजमेंट to obtain an understanding of the objective of their work, processes for complying with the applicable engagement standards, processes of engagement supervision, staff training and coaching, methods of reviewing the work performed, the significant judgments made and the form of report being issued, appropriate documentation of work performed and of the timing and extent of the review, processes to keep all policies and procedures current. नेक्स्ट अगेन फॉर्म मॉनिटरिंग के केस में अगेन फॉर्म एस्टैब्लिश करेंगे पॉलिसीज एंड प्रोसीजर्स डिजाइन टू प्रोवाइड इट विद रीजनेबल अश्योरेंस दैट दीज प्रोसीजर्स रिलेटिंग टू द सिस्टम ऑफ क्वालिटी control are relevant, adequate and operating effectively and complied within in practice. Such policies and procedures should include ongoing consideration and evaluation of firm system of quality control, including a periodic inspection of a selection of a completed engagement. The purpose of monitoring compliance with the quality control policies and procedures is to provide an evaluation of. तो मॉनिटरिंग करके आप क्या एवेल्यूएट करेंगे? अधर करना टू प्रोफेशनल स्टैंडर्ड्स एंड रेगुलेटरी एंड लीगल रिक्वायरमेंट. पहले अधर करना, फिर वेदर क्वालिटी कंट्रोल सिस्टम हैज़ बीन अप्रोप्रिएटली डिजाइंड एंड इफेक्टिवली इम्प्लीमेंटेड, वेदर the firm's quality control policies and procedures have been appropriately applied so that they are issued by the firm or engagement partners as appropriate in the circumstances. Follow up by appropriate firm personnel so that necessary modifications are promptly made toward the quality control policies and procedures. Very important. यहाँ पे क्या डिस्कस किया? जो पर्पस है ऑफ मॉनिटरी कंप्लायंस विद द क्वालिटी control policy and project is to provide the evaluations of these three things. क्या adhere किया to the professional standards and regulatory and legal requirements, क्या quality control system को appropriately design और effectively implement किया गया, क्या firm के quality control policies and procedures को appropriately apply किया हुआ है so that the reports that are issued by the firm or engagement partners are appropriate in the circumstance. Follow up भी होना चाहिए so that necessary notifications are promptly made to the quality control policies and process. It's all about monitoring. This is about engagement performance. Important है क्या क्या matters include करने चाहिए for consistency of the quality. Then it is your human resource. Then SQC 1 क्या चाहता है? एंगेजमेंट एक्सेप्ट करने से पहले ये सारी चीज़ें आप देख लो. ठीक है, इंटीग्रिटी, एंगेजमेंट टीम कॉम्पिटेंट है क्या, क्या वो एथिकल रिक्वायरमेंट्स फुलफिल करेंगे, क्या सिग्निफिकेंट मैटर्स क्या होंगे, उनके इम्प्लीकेशंस क्या होंगे एंड एवरीथिंग. एंड देन वी स्टडीड अबाउट प्रोफेशनल स्केप्टिसिज्म के कुछ एग्जाम्पल्स, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट हियर एज वेल. नेक्स्ट वी विल डिस्कस अबाउट इंडिपेंडेंस. इंडिपेंडेंस में क्या होता है? ओके, जस्ट अ प्लेन रीडिंग. to revise it. The auditor should be independent of the entity subject to the audit. The code describes independence as comprises both of independence of mind and independence in appearance. The auditor's independence safeguards auditor का जो independent है safeguard करता है auditor's ability to form an audit opinion without being affected by any influence. So auditor independent बोलता है कि मैं independent हूँ, तो उसको safeguard करता है the auditor's ability to form an audit opinion without being affected by any influences. Independence enhances the auditor's ability to act with integrity, objectivity, and to maintain an attitude of professional skepticism. SQC 1 sets out the responsibilities of the firm for establishing policies and procedures regarding compliance with relevant ethical requirements. SA 220 sets out the engagement partner responsibilities with respect to relevant ethical requirements. These include evaluating whether members of the engagement team have complied with the relevant ethical requirements. Engagement team is entitled to rely on the firm system in meeting its responsibilities with respect to quality control procedures. Next is independence of ऑडिटर्स. उसमें क्या होता है, जो हमारा प्रोफेशनल इंटीग्रिटी एंड इंडिपेंडेंस आर कंसिडर्ड एसेंशियल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ ऑल प्रोफेशंस बट मोर इन केस ऑफ अकाउंटेंसी प्रोफेशन. ठीक है, इंटीग्रिटी एंड इंडिपेंडेंस आर कंसिडर्ड टू बी द एसेंशियल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ ऑल प्रोफेशंस बट मोर सो इन द केस ऑफ अकाउंटेंसी प्रोफेशन. इंडिपेंडेंसी implies that the judgment of a person is not subordinate to the wishes or the directions of another person who might have engaged him, right? So the judgment hota hai, it is not a subordinate to the wishes or direction of another person who might have engaged him. So it is not possible to define independence precisely. Rules of professional conduct dealing with independence are framed primarily with a certain objective. These rules themselves cannot create or ensure existence of independence. Independence is a condition of mind as well as personal character. Very important for MCQ. Independence is a condition of mind as well as personal character. It should not be confused with superficial and visible standards of independence which are sometimes imposed by laws. So independence is a condition of mind as well as personal character. It should not be confused with the superficial and visible standards of independence which are sometimes imposed by law. There are two interlinked perspectives of independence of auditor. One is interlinked perspectives, very important again for correct incorrect, linked या intralinked कुछ भी नहीं, interlinked perspectives of independence of auditors. One is independence of mind and then independence in appearance. Yeah, what is independence? जो हमारे कोड ऑफ एथिक्स फॉर प्रोफेशनल अकाउंटेंट्स इशूड बाय IFAC है, उन्होंने डिफाइन किया है इंडिपेंडेंस को एज द इंडिपेंडेंस ऑफ माइंड एंड इंडिपेंडेंस ऑफ अपीयरेंस. इंडिपेंडेंस इज इंडिपेंडेंस ऑफ माइंड दैट Independence is independence of mind, the state of mind that permits the provision of an opinion without being affected by influence, following an individual to act with integrity, exercise objectivity and professional skepticism. The state of mind that permits the provision of an opinion without being affected by influences, allowing an individual to act with integrity, exercise objectivity and professional skepticism. Then independence in appearance, the avoidance of facts and circumstances that are so significant, that the third party would reasonably conclude an auditor's integrity, objectivity or professional skepticism has been compromised. So independence of auditor has to not only exist in fact but also appear to exist to all reasonable persons. The objective of audit of financial statement is to enable the auditor to express an opinion on the financial statement. The auditor's opinion helps determination of true and fair view of financial position and operating results of an enterprise. The user should not assume that the auditor's opinion is an assurance as to future viability of the enterprise or the effectiveness of efficiency with the management has conducted the affairs of the enterprise. Okay, again this is correct and correct के लिए important है कि जो ऑडिटर का ओपिनियन है वो देता है ट्रू एंड फेयर व्यू ऑफ द फाइनेंशियल पोजीशन एंड द ऑपरेटिंग रिजल्ट. यूजर अज्यूम नहीं करना चाहिए कि ऑडिटर का जो ओपिनियन है वो अश्योरेंस है एज टू द फ्यूचर वायबिलिटी ऑफ द एंटरप्राइज और द इफेक्टिवनेस और एफिशिएंसी विद द which management has conducted the affairs of the enterprise. The auditor should be straightforward and honest and sincere in his approach to his professional work. He must be true and fair. He must be fair and must not allow prejudice or bias to override his objective. He should maintain an impartial attitude, and both be and appear to be free of any interest which might be regarded as being incompatible with the integrity and objectivity. Many different circumstances or combination of circumstances may be relevant, and accordingly it is possible to determine every situation that creates threat to independence and specify the appropriate mitigating action that should be taken. In addition, the nature of assurance engagement may differ. Consequently, different threats may exist requiring the application of different safeguards. Next is थ्रेट्स टू इंडिपेंडेंस. थ्रेट्स टू इंडिपेंडेंस क्या हो सकते हैं? पहले है सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट थ्रेट विच अकर व्हेन ऑडिटिंग एंड फर्म. जब आप फर्म को ऑडिट कर रहे हो, इट्स पार्टनर और एसोसिएट कुड बेनिफिट फ्रॉम फाइनेंशियल इंटरेस्ट इन एन ऑडिट क्लाइंट. फॉर एग्जांपल, डायरेक्ट फाइनेंशियल इंटरेस्ट और मटेरियली सिग्निफिकेंट इनडायरेक्ट फाइनेंशियल इंटरेस्ट इन अ क्लाइंट. ठीक है, तो पहले तो फाइनेंशियल इंटरेस्ट है. अभी सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट थ्रेट का डेफिनेशन क्या है भाई? देखो, when an auditing firm, जो auditing firm है, its partner और associate could benefit from the financial interest in an audit client. तो जो हमारा auditing firm है या जो partner या associate है, वो benefit करता है from the financial interest in an audit client. Example, direct financial interest or materially significant indirect फाइनेंशियल इंटरेस्ट इन अ क्लाइंट. देन फिर या तो फिर लोन और गारंटी टू और फ्रॉम द कंसर्न क्लाइंट. then undue dependence, फिर undue dependence to the client's fees, hence concerns about losing the engagement. Close business relationship with the audit client, potential employment with the client, contingent fees for the audit engagement. Like in case an audit firm unduly relies on the fees from the client, it may result in threat to self-interest of an auditor, and he may not work objectively for the fear of losing client. So this is all about self-interest threat. यहाँ पे क्या होता है? Which occur when an auditing firm, its partner or associate could benefit from a financial interest in an audit client, जैसे कि direct financial interest or materially significant indirect financial interest in a client, loan or guarantee to or from the concerned client, undue dependence on the client fees and hence concerns about losing the engagement, close business relationship with an audit client, potential employment with the client, contingent fees for the audit engagement, right? Next is self-review threat, which occur when during a review of any judgment or conclusion reached in the previous audit or non-audit engagement service include any professional services provided to an entity by an auditor. Professional service provided to entity by an auditor other than the audit or review of the फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स. यहाँ पे क्या होता है? जो रिव्यू होता है ड्यूरिंग द रिव्यू ऑफ एनी जजमेंट और कंक्लूजन रीच्ड इन द प्रीवियस ऑडिट और नॉन ऑडिट एंगेजमेंट, or when a member of the audit team was previously a director or a senior employee of the client. Instances where such threats come into play are when the auditor having recently being the director or senior officer of the company, and when the auditor performs services that are themselves subject matters of audit, right? तो तब वो माना जाएगा आपका सेल्फ रिव्यू थ्रेट. What is advocacy threat? Occurs when the auditor promote करता है or it is perceived to promote and client's opinion to a point where people may believe that the objectivity is getting compromised. Example, when the auditor deals with shares or securities of the audited company or becomes the client to advocate in litigation and third party dispute. In such situation, auditor can be perceived as backing and championing causes of the auditing client, and it may lead to belief that the auditor is not acting and working objectively. Remember that auditor has not only to be independent but also appear to be independent as well. So if the auditor promotes or is perceived to promote a client's opinion to a point where people may believe that the objectivity is getting compromised. Next is familiarity threat. Familiarity threats are self-evident hai, and occurs when the auditor form relationships with the client where they end up being too sympathetic to the client's interest. This can occur in many ways, जैसे कि close relative of the audit team working in senior position of the client company, former partner of the audit firm being the director or senior employee of the client, long association between specific auditors and their specific counterparts, and acceptance of significant gifts or hospitality from the client company, its directors or employees. So these are all familiarity threats. Provisions regarding the rotation of auditors mainly address these very familiarity threats. Such provisions prescribe that the auditor is rotated after a certain number of years so that the auditor do not become too familiar with their clients. Next is intimidation threats, which occurs when the auditors are deterred from acting objectively with an adequate degree of professional skepticism. Auditors are deterred from acting objectively with an adequate degree of professional skepticism. Basically, these could happen because of threat of replacement over disagreements with the application of accounting principles or pressure to disproportionately reduce work in response to reduced audit fees or being threatened with litigation. Such threat attempt to intimidate auditors to deter them from acting objectively. तो अगर deter them from acting objectively है तो वो intimidation threat होगा. So which occurs when the auditors are deterred from acting objectively with an adequate degree of professional skepticism. This could happen because of a threat of replacement over disagreements with the application of accounting principles or pressure to disproportionately reduce work in response to reduced audit fees. Now, what are the safeguards of audit independence? Very easy. Chartered accountant has a responsibility to remain independent by taking into account the context in which they practice, the threats to independence, and the safeguards available to eliminate the threats. For the public to have confidence in the quality of audit, it is essential that the auditor should always be and appear to be independent of the entities that they are auditing. So for public to have confidence in the quality of audit, it is essential that auditors should always be and appear to be independent of the entities that they are auditing. In case of audit, the key fundamental principles are integrity, objectivity, and professional skepticism, which necessarily require the auditor to be independent. Before taking on any work, the auditor must conscientiously consider whether it involves threat to his independence. तो काम लेने से पहले देखना चाहिए कि threat to independence involved है क्या. Next, when such threat exists, the auditor should either desist from the task or put in place safeguards that eliminate them. If the auditor is unable to fully implement credible and adequate safeguards, then he must not accept the work. So this is all about the safeguard. These are the various threats of independence and what is independence of mind and independence of appearance. The avoidance of facts and circumstances that are so significant that a third party would reasonably conclude an auditor's integrity, objectivity, or professional skepticism has been compromised. Next is qualities of an auditor. क्या होना चाहिए? देखो इधर क्या लिखा हुआ है. ही इज कंसर्न विद रिपोर्टिंग ऑन द फाइनेंशियल मैटर्स ऑफ बिजनेस एंड अदर इंस्टीट्यूशंस. फाइनेंशियल मैटर्स inherently are to be set with the problems of human fallibility. Errors and frauds are frequent. The qualities required are tact, caution, firmness, good temper, integrity, discretion, industry, judgment, patience, clear-headedness, reliability. In short, all those personal qualities that go to make a good businessman contribute to making a good auditor. In addition, he must have the shine of culture for attaining a great height. He must have the highest degree of integrity backed by adequate independence. Highest degree of integrity backed by adequate independence. Integrity, objectivity, and independence is one of the fundamental principles of professional ethics. He must have a thorough knowledge of the general principles of law which govern matters with which he is likely to be in mate contact. If the Companies Act needs special mention, but mercantile law, especially the law relating to contracts, is no less important. Where undertakings are governed by a special statute, its knowledge will be imperative. A sound knowledge of the law and practice of taxation is unavoidable. He must pursue an intensive program of theoretical education and subjects. Theoretical education भी लेना चाहिए, like financial management, general management, law, information system, taxation, etc. Both practical training and theoretical education are equally necessary for the development of professional competence of an auditor for undertaking any kind of audit assignment. So, for development of professional competence of an auditor for undertaking any kind of audit assignment, the auditor should be equipped not only with sufficient knowledge of the way in which business generally is conducted, but also with the understanding of the special features peculiar to a particular business whose accounts are under audit. The auditor should hold a position of trust, must have the basic human qualities apart from the technical requirement of professional training and education. He is called upon constantly to critically review the financial statements, and it is obviously useless for him to attempt the task unless his own knowledge is that of an expert. An exhaustive knowledge of accounting in all of its branches of the practice of auditing. He must know thoroughly all accounting principles and techniques. So accordingly, auditor must be honest, that he must not certify what he does not believe to be true, and must take reasonable care and skill before he believes that what he certifies is true, right? So these are the qualities of an auditor. SSASB के बारे में हमने पढ़ लिया है already. Next we will discuss about inherent limitations of audit and some of the advantages of audit. Audit is an independent examination of financial information of any entity, whether profit oriented or not, irrespective of its size or legal form. When such an examination is conducted with a view to expressing an opinion thereon, the person conducting the person conducting the task should take care to ensure that financial statements would not mislead anybody. Mislead नहीं होने चाहिए. तो this he can do it honestly by satisfying himself that accounts have been drawn with reference to the entries in the books of accounts. Books of accounts are supported. The entries in the books of accounts are adequately supported by sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. None of the entries in the books of accounts has been omitted in the process of compilation, and nothing which is not in the books of accounts has found place in statements. The information conveyed by the statement is clear and unambiguous. The financial statement amounts are properly classified, described, and disclosed in conformity with the accounting standards. The statements of account present a true and fair picture of the operational results of the assets and liabilities. So I hope it is clear. To make sure that the financial statement does not mislead anybody, auditor will take care of the following things. What it is: accounts have been drawn up with reference to the entries in the books of accounts. The entries in the books of accounts are adequately supported by sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. None of the entries are omitted in the process of compilation, and nothing which is not in the books of accounts has been found place in statements. The information conveyed by the statement is clear and unambiguous. The financial statement amounts are properly classified, described, and disclosed in conformity with accounting standards, and the statement of accounts present a true and fair picture of the operational results of the assets and liabilities. What is the objective of audit? As per SA 200, overall objectives of the independent auditor in conducting an audit of financial statements. The overall objectives of the auditor are to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statement as a whole are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, thereby enabling the auditor to express an opinion thereon. Whether the financial statements are prepared in all material aspects in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework. To report on the financial statements and communicate as required by the SAs, right? Next, what is the scope of audit? The following points merit consideration in regard to the scope of audit. The audit should be organized. Audit should be organized to cover adequately all aspects of the enterprise relevant to the financial statements being audited. तो audit को ऐसे organize करो कि वो adequately cover करे all aspects of the enterprise relevant to the financial statements being audited. Yeah, so the auditor should the audit should be organized to cover adequately all aspects of enterprise relevant to financial statements being audited. To form an opinion on the financial statements, the auditor should be reasonably satisfied as to whether the information contained in the underlying accounting records and other source data is reliability and sufficient as the basis for the preparation of the financial statements. In forming his opinion, the auditor should also decide whether the relevant information is properly disclosed in the financial statement subject to statutory requirements where applicable. The auditor assesses the reliability and sufficiency of the information contained in the underlying accounting records and other source data by reliability और sufficient का information reliable और sufficient है कि नहीं, auditor ये कैसे assess करता है? By making a study and evaluation of accounting systems and internal control. Making a study and evaluation of accounting systems and internal controls, carrying out such other test inquiries and other verification procedures of accounting transactions and account balances as he considers appropriate in the circumstances. तो अगर auditor को assess करना है reliability and sufficiency of information contained in the underlying accounting records and other source data, वो कैसे assess करेगा? Making a study and evaluation of accounting systems and internal control, carrying out such other test inquiries and other verification procedures of accounting transactions and account balances as he considers appropriate in the particular circumstances. ठीक है, ये हो गया reliability and sufficiency. The auditor determines whether the relevant information is properly disclosed in the financial. तो जो वो relevant information है वो properly disclosed है कि नहीं, वो कैसे auditor determine करेगा? Comparing the financial statement with the underlying accounting records and other source data to see whether they properly summarize the transactions and events recorded therein. फिर considering the judgments that the management has made in preparing the financial statements, accordingly the auditor assesses the selection and consistent application of accounting policies, the manner in which the information has been classified, and the adequacy of disclosures. तो reliability और sufficiency of information जो underlying accounting records में है उसको कैसे assess करोगे? Making a study and evaluation of accounting systems and internal controls, carrying out such other tests. अभी information properly disclosed है कि नहीं, तो क्या करोगे? Comparing financial statement and underlying accounting records and other source data and considering the judgments that management has made in preparing the financial statements, right? So these two things are also again there in your scope of audit. The auditor is not expected to perform duties which fall outside the scope of his competence. For example, professional skill required of an auditor does not include that of a technical expert for determining physical condition of certain assets. Constraints on the scope of audit of financial statements that impair the auditor's ability to express an unqualified opinion on the financial statement should be set out in a report, and a qualified opinion or a disclaimer of opinion should be expressed as appropriate, right? Qualified या disclaimer of opinion अगर constraint है. फिर auditor is not expected to perform duties which fall outside the scope of his competence. फिर relevant information properly disclosed है कि नहीं वो देखोगे, reliability and sufficiency देखोगे. फिर audit should be organized to cover adequately all aspects of enterprise. To form an opinion, auditor should be satisfied कि जो information contained है underlying record में वो reliable and sufficient है, और auditor decide करेगा whether relevant information is properly disclosed in financial statements subject to statutory requirements wherever applicable. Aspects हमने देखा कि audit को ऐसे conduct करना चाहिए कि वो सारे adequately cover करे all aspects. तो aspects में क्या आता है? The principal aspects to be covered in an audit of financial statements are examination of the system of accounting and internal control. Accounting system and internal control to ascertain whether it is appropriate for the business and helps in proper recording of all transactions. Review, checking, verification. Reviewing the system and the procedures to find out whether they are adequate and comprehensive, and incidentally whether material inadequacies and weaknesses exist to allow frauds and errors going unnoticed. Checking the arithmetical accuracy of the books of accounts by verification of postings, balances, etc. Verification of the authenticity and validity of transactions entered into by making an examination of the entries in the books of accounts with the relevant supporting documents. Ascertaining that a proper distinction has been made between items of capital and revenue nature, and that the amounts of various items of income and expenditure are adjusted in accounts corresponding to the accounting period only. Comparison of balance sheet and P&L account or other statements with underlying record in order to see that they are in accordance therewith. Verification of the title, existence and the value of assets appearing in the बैलेंस शीट. तो ये सब एस्पेक्ट्स कवर्ड है, लाइक एग्जामिनेशन ऑफ अकाउंटिंग सिस्टम एंड इंटरनल कंट्रोल, देन रिव्यू द सिस्टम एंड प्रोसीजर्स, चेकिंग अर्थमेटिकल एक्यूरेसी, वेरिफिकेशन ऑफ ऑथेंटिसिटी एंड वैलिडिटी ऑफ ट्रांजैक्शन, प्रॉपर डिस्टिंक्शन बिटवीन कैपिटल एंड रेवेन्यू नेचर, कंपेयरिंग बैलेंस शीट एंड P&L with underlying records, and verification of title, existence and value of assets. Assertions क्या होंगे about account balance? अकाउंट बैलेंसेस एट पीरियड एंड के क्या असर्शन होंगे? एग्जिस्टेंस, राइट्स एंड ऑब्लिगेशंस, कंप्लीटनेस, वैल्यूएशन एंड अलोकेशन. एग्जिस्टेंस, राइट एंड ऑब्लिगेशन, कंप्लीशन, वैल्यूएशन एंड अलोकेशन. एग्जिस्टेंस में क्या क्या आते हैं? एसेट, लाइबिलिटी, इक्विटी, इंटरेस्ट. राइट्स एंड ऑब्लिगेशन, the entity holds or controls the right to assets, and liabilities are the obligations of the entity. All assets should be, liability, equity should have been recorded. Valuation and allocation included in financial statements at appropriate amount, and any resulting valuation or allocation adjustment are appropriately recorded, right? फिर क्या देखोगे? वेरिफिकेशन ऑफ लाइबिलिटी स्टेटेड इन बैलेंस शीट, चेकिंग द रिजल्ट्स ऑफ द P&L एंड टू सी वेदर द रिजल्ट्स शो आर ट्रू एंड फेयर, whether audit is of a corporate body, confirming that the statutory requirements have been complied with, reporting to the appropriate person of audit whether the statement of account examined do reveal true and fair view of the state of affairs and of the profit and loss account. What is assertions? Assertions are representations made by the management, explicit or otherwise, that are embodied in the financial statement as used by the auditor to consider different type of potential misstatements that may occur. Audit is not legally obligatory for all types of business organizations or institutions. On this basis, audit may be categorized into two audits: audit required under law in an voluntary category. The organizations which require audit under law are companies, banking companies and statutory bodies. In voluntary category are the audits of accounts of proprietary entities, partnership firms, Hindu undivided family, etc. In respect of such accounts, there is no legal requirement of audit. Many of the enterprise, as a matter of internal rules, require audit. Some may be required to get their accounts audited on the directives of government for various purposes like sanction of grants, loans, etc. But the important motive of getting accounts audited lies in the advantage that follow from an independent professional audit. This is perhaps the reason why large number of proprietary and partnership business firms get their accounts audited. Government companies have some special features which will be discussed later. So one sec. Not so important. A special reference is necessary for non-profit making institutions like schools, clubs and hospitals. Most of these have internal rules to govern their affairs, and generally a provision about the requirement of audit is inserted. Activity in the nature of business is not altogether ruled out, as a club may sell drinks and eatables to the members and their guests, or schools may have endowed agricultural property to yield income. What makes them distinct is the absence of the question of division of profit. Any surplus which may arise only be used for the achieving the objects of the institutions. Educational institutions, hospitals, associations, irrespective of any internal rules, get their accounts audited because most of them enjoy government and municipal grants. Generally, for this purpose, audit accounts are insisted open. Trust, however, stand on slightly different footing. There may be public trust or private trust. Trust can carry on businesses as well. In majority of cases, trustees are private persons. Trusts generally have two classes of beneficiaries: tenants for life and remainders. Persons to whom accounts are of supreme importance are often widows and minors who cannot criticize the accounts in any effective manner. Although audit of trust, except for public trust, is not mandatory, yet most of the trust deeds contain a clause for audit of accounts. Private trustees also recognize the advantage of audit in their own interest, since any erroneous treatment in the accounts for which they might be personally liable will be pointed out by the auditor. What are the advantages of audit of financial statements? It safeguards the financial interest of the person who are not associated with the management of the entity, whether they are partners or shareholders, bankers, financial institutions, public at large, etc. It acts as a moral check on the employees from committing defalcations or embezzlement. Audited financial statements are helpful in setting liability. Settlement. Helpful in settling liability for taxes, negotiating loans, and for determining the purchase consideration for business. They are also useful for settling trade disputes for higher wages or bonus, as well as claims in respect of damage suffered by property by fire or other calamity. An audit can also help in the detection of wastages and losses to show the different ways by which they might be checked, especially that those occur due to the absence of inadequacy of internal checks or internal control measures. Audit ascertains whether the necessary books of accounts and allied records have been properly kept and help the client in making good deficiencies or inadequacies in this respect. As an appraisal function, audit reviews the existence and operations of various controls in the organization and report weaknesses, inadequacies, etc. in them. Audited accounts are of great help in the settlement of accounts at the time of admission or death of a partner. Government may require audited and certified financial statements before giving assistance or issues a license for a particular trade. Now, what are the inherent limitations for the audit? Very important. The auditor is not expected to and cannot reduce audit risk to zero and cannot therefore obtain absolute assurance and that the financial statements are free from material misstatement due to fraud or error. This is because there are inherent limitations of audit. The inherent limitations of audit are nature of financial reporting. The preparation of financial statements involves judgment by management in applying the requirements of the entity's applicable financial reporting framework to the facts and circumstances of the entity. तो judgment लगाना पड़ता है. In addition, many financial items involve subjective decisions or assessments or degree of uncertainty, and there may be a range of acceptable interpretations or judgments that can be made. नेक्स्ट इज नेचर ही ऐसा है ऑडिट प्रोसीजर का कि हम एब्सोल्यूट अश्योरेंस नहीं ले सकते हैं. देर आर प्रैक्टिकल एंड लीगल लिमिटेशंस ऑन द ऑडिटर्स एबिलिटी टू ऑब्टेन ऑडिट एविडेंस. देर इज अ पॉसिबिलिटी दैट मैनेजमेंट और अदर्स मे नॉट प्रोवाइड इंटेंशनली और अनइंटेंशनली द कंप्लीट information that is relevant to the preparation and presentation of financial statements or that has been requested by the auditor. Fraud may involve sophisticated and carefully organized schemes designed to conceal it. Therefore, audit procedures used to gather audit evidence may be ineffective for detecting an intentional misstatement that involves, for example, collusion to falsify documentation, which may cause the auditor to believe that the audit evidence is valid when it is not. The auditor is neither trained as not expected to be an expert in the authentication of documents. So, fraud involves sophisticated and carefully organized scheme designed to conceal it. An audit is not official investigation into alleged wrongdoing. An audit is not an official investigation into alleged wrongdoing. Accordingly, auditor is not given specific legal power such as the power of search, which may be necessary for such an investigation. We have to clearly understand that audit is distinct from investigation. Investigation is the critical examination of accounts with a special purpose. Investigation is the critical examination of accounts with a special purpose. For example, if fraud is suspected and if specifically called upon to check the accounts whether fraud really exists, it takes the character of investigation. The objective of audit, on the other hand, is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the FS as a whole are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, thereby enabling an auditor to express an opinion. Therefore, audit is never started with a preconceived notion about state of affairs, about wrongdoing, about some wrong having been committed. So audit is never started with a preconceived notion about the state of affairs, about wrongdoing, about some wrong having been committed. The auditor seeks to report what it finds in normal course of examination of accounts. So he seeks to just report. However, it is quite possible that investigation results from prima facie findings of the auditor. Investigation results from the prima facie findings of the auditor. It may happen that the auditor have given some findings of a serious concern. Such findings may prompt for calling an investigation, timeliness of financial reporting, and balance between benefit and cost. The matter of difficulty, time, or cost involved is not in itself a valid basis for an auditor to omit an audit procedure for which there is no alternative. Appropriate planning assists in making sufficient time and resources available for the conduct of the audit. Notwithstanding this, the relevance of information and thereby its value tends to diminish over time, and there is balance to be struck between the reliability of information and its cost. Other matters that affect the limitations of an audit. In what are the other matters? In case of certain subject matters, limitations on the auditor's ability to detect material misstatement are particularly significant. Such assertions or subject matters include fraud, particularly fraud involving senior management or collusion, the existence and completeness of related party relationships transactions, the occurrence of non compliance with laws and regulations, future events or conditions that may cause an entity to cease to continue as a growing concern. तो फ्रॉड सच्ची में एग्जिस्ट करता है नहीं बता सकते, गारंटी नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस है. रिलेटेड पार्टी ट्रांजैक्शंस में गारंटी नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस है. अकरेंस ऑफ नॉन कंप्लायंस विद लॉस एंड रेगुलेशंस, फिर गोइंग कंसर्न अगेन नहीं बता सकते कि लिमिटेशन है, राइट. तो इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस ऑफ ऑडिट, राइट. So this is all about your chapter number 1. Next is relationship of auditing with other disciples. Auditing and accounting. Auditing reviews the financial statements which are nothing but an result of the overall accounting process. Auditing and law. Auditor should have a good knowledge of the business law affecting the entity. Auditing and economy. Auditor is expected to be familiar with overall economic environment of the client. Knowledge of human behavior is essentially for an auditor to effectively discharge its duties. To have the knowledge of statistical sampling for meaningful conclusions and mathematics for verification of inventories. EDB auditing in itself is developing as a discipline itself. The auditor is expected to have knowledge about financial techniques such as working capital management, fund flow, etc. Auditing and production. Good auditor is one who understands the client, his business functions such as production, cost system, marketing, etc. So it's all about your chapter number 1.